The following is a presentation of the Mat Talk Podcast Network.
I can't tell you how many people came up to us and were just like, we just want to say thank you for starting wrestling, a Division I program here in Arkansas. We just want to tell you how excited we are. There's just a sense of gratefulness to what we're doing alongside the excitement.
1 year since the hiring of Neil Eresman, things have been changing at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. Construction was starting on the new on-campus practice facility. Recruits have joined Connor Ward, creating the roster for the first team that would take to the mats in November of 2019. And conference affiliation and scheduling was starting to become more prominent in the eyes of Coach Neil Eresman. That wrestling facility was set to finish in late September, just days before the official start of practice. Eresman's wrestling family had grown, but his immediate family was growing too, as a new Eresman child was coming in the late summer. A year after Neil Eresman was hired, the wrestling program started looking like it was a real wrestling program. With 1 year down, but his first official year leading the program set to go, he was leading the school into uncharted waters. Now, the actual competitive work had to get done. Welcome to Rocked Up, the story of the foundation and formation of the first Division I college wrestling program in Arkansas, starting in November of 2019 at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. This is the 9th edition of the story. We started this journey developing the foundation of wrestling in the state of Arkansas, and now we've moved on to the formation of the team, because to tell the full story of this program, you have to start at the very beginning. We get to a year in. Eresman doesn't have a schedule. He doesn't have a conference. He doesn't have an assistant coach. He doesn't even yet have a wrestling room. Although the construction of that wrestling room, or perhaps the delayed start of the construction of the wrestling room, left him a little on edge. It's not like he doesn't like tennis or anything.
It was basically an old tennis court that was kind of tore up a little bit just because they were in there trying to do some different things to figure out how they were going to build the building. And just to see it, like for a while, I was like, man, this is taking a while. This might not happen. I'm kind of tired of seeing these tennis courts every day. But then all of a sudden overnight, it was like they came, they tore the court up. They got the foundation poured. They got the piers set, and now, we have a structure that has 4 walls. I mean, you're talking a couple weeks, and all of that's been done since the foundation's been poured. So I would imagine it's going to be done a lot sooner than later.
Eresman had moved around a bit, from Kansas to Oklahoma for college, staying in Oklahoma to coach high school before leaving to go to the University of North Carolina to join their coaching staff. Now he's got Arkansas plates, or at least his giant truck does. Coach Eresman and his family have settled in, become part of the community, but that community has plenty of questions.
Man, we just jumped right in with both feet, me and my family, and we love it. We fit in. It's a laid back place where you can be in the middle of a metropolitan city, or you can be out in the country, and it takes 5 minutes either direction. The response has just been unbelievable. Like, for instance, our gear store on campus is sold out 4 times. Everywhere I go, if someone sees something Little Rock Wrestling on my shirt, they're wanting to stop me and talk about it and saying, what's this about? I've been hearing about it. So, anything from just extreme excitement for everybody who knows about it to this kind of just what is going on. I want to know more about Little Rock Wrestling.
A year in, there still wasn't a whole lot around Connor Ward. We heard about the second semester additions, but Neil couldn't really talk about them until they stepped on campus.
One in particular who's on campus is Jose Champagne. Jose comes from the University of Minnesota. He's been here all semester. I think he lost like 8 or 9 matches in his combined couple years at Minnesota. Battled for the spot. He's beat some kids that have won, been to nationals and won their conferences and beat them pretty handily. He brings a lot of experience. He brings a good attitude. And, he's someone that I'm looking for to kind of just take the reins and run with it and say, this is what to expect, boys, and follow me and we'll do great things. So he's one I'm definitely excited about.
Another key transfer who would come later is Paul Bianchi, who comes in from North Dakota State University and is a Wisconsin native. Matter of fact, his family's coming too. One of his brothers is already on the team, and another brother is already committed. Although NCAA rules prohibit Neil from saying anything about that. Coach was definitely excited on what he was building, even though we were still months away from the first whistle blowing.
Really, the first guy that I got, the actual first guy was Connor Ward, which we talked about. But there's been several freshmen that I'm super excited about that you really just can't go to. I can go up and down the lineup of guys I've got and tell you how excited about certain ones, but I can tell you why I'm excited for all of them. I got a kid out of Allen, Texas that, I think he was top 50 pound for pound, maybe top 30. And he's, one Reno, one, placed, I think, third or fourth in Ironman and just doing some really good stuff.
As of right now, we know Little Rock eventually joins the Pac-12 conference as an associate member in the sport of wrestling. But when Arizman was trying to build his schedule, that conference affiliation hadn't yet been decided. Little Rock was still trying to get into the Big 12. And when that didn't work, they tried the MAC. But the MAC had recently accepted 7 teams from the Eastern Wrestling League. So that conference didn't seem like it was ready to take on a 16th member after having basically doubled the size of its conference. This caused some early headaches for Arizman.
Man, the schedule's been really, really hard because you're sitting here trying to build it, and I'm telling coaches, I don't know what conference we're in, so I can't promise a return. Or, this date might not work next year. So we're not actually completely finished with our schedule. But, man, it's actually been a lot harder than I thought because everybody wants to wrestle you. And then, coaches will spin it, hey, we'll come to you year one. Great. Well, you just placed top 5 in the nationals, and every other team in the top 10 wants to wrestle us. So then you got to decide, where you're going to pick your battles at. And we're going to wrestle the best and we're going to fight the best, but we got to make sure that we get our schedule set that is conducive to what we're trying to accomplish.
While somewhat confusing compared to other sports, the Division I wrestling qualification system is based on individual matches. There are 3 standards you have to hit: your coach's rank, your win percentage, and your RPI, which is a measure of your opponent's win percentage and their opponent's win percentage, basically a strength of schedule. RPI becomes a buzzword in March, specifically around basketball and March Madness. So why does everybody want to wrestle Little Rock? They see it as a potential easy win and W's from the Division I standpoint on their individual wrestlers' records. It does a team no good to beat up on a Division II or Division III program when it comes to qualifying standards at the NCAA Division I level. So while some of these powerhouse programs reaching out to come to Little Rock to help their program also have ulterior motives, getting their guys some extra qualifying wins. Wrestling also has 2 unique styles of competition. The dual meet, which is a head-to-head format, putting your 10 wrestlers in your 10 weight classes against my 10 wrestlers in my 10 weight classes, and tournaments, which can be invitationals or opens. Most of the regular season in college wrestling is dual meets. The postseason goes tournaments. So when building a schedule, Coach Arizman has to look at the dynamic of what he wants to do with his team. Does he want to load it up with dual meets? Or does he want to have tournaments to give all his team an opportunity to compete and get them primed for the postseason by giving them a simulation of what they might see down the line?
I went into this with an open mind about how I was going to build my squad. I didn't know if it was going to be all freshmen. I didn't know what transfers I was going to be able to have. I think the transfer portal really helped us this year. I think that I have mixed emotions on it for the future. As I was putting this squad together, I realized that there's going to be a couple weights we're going to have to wrestle some young guys. So I kind of built my schedule to ease in, to be harder through the middle of the season, and then to, give us more time towards the end of the year to really fine tune. In the beginning, we're probably going to go to, it's going to be more tournament heavy in the beginning. We're going to take a couple of tournaments and before we wrestle our first duel and have to make a decision on who we're pulling out a red shirt or who's not going to red shirt, and give them a couple opportunities to compete and see who's ready and who needs time to grow. And then we're going to hit some duels. And then in the middle of the season, we're going to go to the Southern Scuffle. And then from there, try to catch a couple tough duels. And in our dual schedule, we got some Power Fives. And so it's going to be a good mix of what it feels like to wrestle clear across the board honestly, from east to west, I think we're heading out west and dueling a couple teams and staying here in the Midwest as well. So when I built it, I tried to build it with a few more tournaments to determine our squad, then go through a decent dual season with a really, really solid tournament in the Southern Scuffle to give us a good idea of where we're at, and then kind of left just, 4 or 5 duels on the back end of the season to let us, to continue to let us to compete and to grow, but also to give us good time in between competition to fix some things and sharpen our skill.
In a wrestling sense, Arkansas has been a flyover state for Division I wrestling programs. There's been no stops to drive through, so teams when they're heading east or west had no reason to stop in the state. Now, Arizman explains how scheduling home duels in a place where wrestling didn't exist prior is also complicated.
A lot of these school schedules are kind of already mapped out for the most part, and trying to get them to come here on a year where they're already traveling near us has been really kind of the difficult part. Just that timing of when they can come and who they're going to wrestle. We have a lot of schools close, but it doesn't always work out with the timing.
A guy like Arizman is suited for success. He comes from a culture of winning, which makes probably the next question one of the toughest ones he's had to answer. With any first-year team, losing is going to become a regular thing. How is a coach going to be able to handle that? Because that will be season one's reality.
I think that you have to be prepared for anything. I think that's the great thing of what wrestling does for you. It prepares you for all scenarios. I am prepared if the season does not go how we want it. I expect the best. I expect the most. I expect us to wrestle at a high pace. I expect us to score a lot of points. But I also know that doesn't happen overnight, and great things don't just appear. So I do know that we might take some lumps, but I think it's about attitude and how you handle those situations and how you handle the guys, how you handle just the atmosphere. We're going to compete hard in everything we do from day one of preseason. We're trying to create a culture of competing and not just practicing, not just training. So we're going to do a lot of things to try to create this, create and keep this mentality that no matter what we do, we're not just going to compete, but we're going to do whatever we can, do whatever it takes to win. And if you beat us, you're going to walk off that mat saying, I don't ever want to wrestle against those guys again because that was the toughest match I've ever wrestled. That was the hardest match I've ever wrestled. That's kind of the attitude that we're going to take.
The most important part of the first-year schedule, though, is the first home duel. The Jack Stevens Center on campus will host the first ever Little Rock wrestling duel on November 24th at 2 p.m. Central. Coming to face the Trojans in their first ever home duel, the Eagles of the University of the Ozarks, a Division III school from Clarksville, Arkansas.
We wanted something local. We wanted something that could draw fans. And it really just started, Leroy reached out to me, and that's really where the idea came. And we really built it after he reached out. So, at that point, we weren't even really building our schedule yet. This was last August, September. And he was like, we'll come to you. We'd love to wrestle you. And that's really where the idea came from. We want to put fans in the seat or in the seats. And we just came to the conclusion that that was the best option for us for our first home duel. And, we're going to run with it.
In addition to his duties as an officer in the United States Navy, Leroy Gardner is entering his 4th year as the head coach at the University of the Ozarks. Like many coaches around the state, he was pretty pleased to hear about Little Rock's addition to the wrestling landscape.
Knowing the growth that we'd seen in wrestling from our vantage point in the state and in the region, and then looking at the landscape of, especially Division I wrestling kind of across, the United States, is very, I think, a strategic location. When I look at it from a coaching standpoint, just high level, it's not that far from a couple of pretty good metropolitan areas in order to recruit. It's easy to get in and out of. It's a relatively large, city. Lots of things to do. The cost is reasonable. So all those things, just from a strategic standpoint as a coach, I'm going, you could recruit there. And I think that was cool. So I was excited. I was excited for the state. I was excited for the sport. And I think overall excited, for wrestling.
So according to Arizman, it was Gardner who made the call. But there's actually a little bit more to that story, as it wasn't Gardner who came up with the idea initially. It was Miguel Beret, the 184-pound senior from Texas. He actually pitched the idea. to Coach Gardner?
Actually, Miguel, one of our wrestlers, he texted me one day and he goes, "Hey, Coach, can we wrestle Little Rock?" And I love the idea, right? And it was really, especially since it came from one of my guys, I was like, cool. I said, I'll text Neil right now. And I did. Literally that 2 minutes later, texted him. I said, hey, you want to get on a duel, for next year. And it just turned out that it's the first one. So he was all about it. And, we talked, that was over text message. And then we talked we made a point to talk, I think it was a couple, 3 days later. And he said, hey, I'll go, I'm going to talk to my AD. I got a meeting next week with him on those plans, and I'll get back with you on more details. And I just said, hey, let me know what I can do to make this a successful event for the state of Arkansas. And that was it. It was that simple.
And while Division I coaches were licking their chops trying to get on Little Rock's schedule, the University of the Ozarks is different. They're Division III, and it's been pointed out their matches really don't impact the qualification standards for Division I wrestling, and vice versa. But Ozarks is in Arkansas. It's one of the programs that were started from scratch within the last decade. It's relevant to the state, it's relevant to the sport, and in this case, it's very relevant to the community. There are 10 Arkansas natives on Leroy Gardner's team. This makes the most sense to kick off a program. Even though Little Rock's in its first year, it may be the one duel all year that the Trojans are favorites.
I think it's very fitting. I think that it's good for Arkansas people because they're going to see a lot of Arkansas kids wrestling, not just on our team, but on Ozark's team. And there's going to be a lot of Arkansans competing, at the Division Level 1 for the first time, representing their state locally. And I think it's more than fitting. I think it's what's needed. I think we needed to do that for the state of Arkansas to show them that, we can put a product out. We can put a great product out, and not just at our level, but at multiple levels. So I think it's a perfect fit.
Gardner's a Minnesota native who wrestled for Division III powerhouse Wartburg in Waverly, Iowa. Iowa's a state that has every level of collegiate wrestling and sells out its high school state tournaments routinely. Gardner knows a wrestling landscape, and with Little Rock coming on board, the state now has Division I, Division II, Division III, NAIA, women, and junior college wrestling. But how does a Division I school impact the schools in other divisions?
Definitely the benefits for us is that I think the level of wrestling in Arkansas will, and kind of the area, I expect will continue to improve now that that goal exists and people keep continuing wrestling, and one more opportunity to put through, college experienced wrestlers at a high level and send them back to a high school as a coach or in the area as a coach. And so I think long term, for me, I viewed it as a wholly positive on the development of higher level wrestling. And so when, maybe I won't, I don't know if I'll benefit 10 years down the line from the recruiting gains there as the level gets better, but someone will, and that's great. I think as and sure, in the near term, there are kids that probably, or I know there's kids I talked to last year that, they're like, hey, I'm going to Little Rock. Great. I want them to go do well. And there's kids that will find out, I think in college, it's really about fit. And so you want to find folks that fit with what we have to offer. We're very different size-wise, and we're pretty liberal arts education and all the things, small school and Division III than Little Rock. So it'll shake itself out in the end, and the folks that want to go do that will go do that, and the folks that are interested in what we're about will find us. And so I think there's enough. I don't think it's zero sum. In my opinion, from a recruiting standpoint, I'll still find the guys that I can develop and go compete, and so will Neil, and I think all of us will be better for it. And every once in a while, we'll probably heckle each other a little bit over one or the other, but I wish them well, and I think it's great.
In non-revenue sports like wrestling, you're more likely to see a Division I school wrestle or compete against a team in Division II, Division III, or the NAIA. While the state's media and the national wrestling media will be focused on Little Rock on that opening duel, Coach Gardner knows that the University of the Ozarks is also going to stand right there, center stage. That opportunity to put his school in a spotlight is also something he's not overlooking.
I'm a competitor, that's why we don't wrestle on paper. We want to go down there and compete with those guys, and hopefully our best is successful and winning. But I think the benefits are when I recruit and I tell guys that we're going to go find the best competition we can find, this is that in action. I'm going to go find division. We won't back down from Division I opponents. We're going to go try and compete with the best people we can. And it just so happens that, they're an hour and 20 minutes away from us. And it's a great opportunity for our student athletes to get that experience. I know I really enjoyed that as a student athlete, getting the chance to put my foot on the line against everybody. And so that's what I want our guys to have the same experience. And I think that's the benefit from a competitive standpoint, because once you slap hands, you realize wrestling's just wrestling. It's not, they don't give you 5 points to start the match just because you're a D1 guy. And I think that's the cool part for all competitive athletes is, a takedown still a takedown, and so that's really for me from an athletic standpoint. I think also, I knew I was a little bit strategic in that from outside looking in. I think it puts us in a conversation. The fact that I'm on the phone with you now, University of Ozarks wrestling is getting talked about places that it wouldn't be otherwise. And so at this point, so I'm grateful for that. And I know, my AD is supportive of it. And, like at the end of the day, my president will see that stuff. And so just building a program myself, I think all of those things are positives for us. And I don't think there's any, there's no downsides. There's no downsides for us on this. And I think that's where I'm excited about it. And I think the state of Arkansas too, like as we keep growing, and I said when I took this job, I wanted all of us to grow and be better and be the best we can be in Arkansas. And that includes, Coach Erickson and Williams and, ABC and CBC. And so it's like, this is part of us trying to do that part. So I think that's it in a nutshell.
There's a growing fraternity of college coaches in Arkansas. And as new schools get added each year, that fraternity is growing.
I really think that this state and Mr. Hatcher and all the people that are sort of stakeholders in wrestling in Arkansas, I think especially the college level, I don't know if the communication and sort of the camaraderie exists a little bit, because I think we all know kind of what it means to be a college coach in a emerging kind of newish wrestling state. And I think that's something that isn't necessarily apparent, Tom and all of us, all the coaches and, Crutchmer down at OBU, like, I'm a text away from all those guys. And I'm not sure how much that exists in Ohio or something, where I know here there's definitely a little bit of a fraternity altogether. Like we know what it's like and what it's about. And, it's not zero sum, like my success or OBU success or Lion success or Little Rock success is not take away from mine. Now, maybe on November 24th, it will be zero sum, and we're gonna go after those guys. But when we all do well, we all do well, I guess, is kind of what I want to make sure people understand, and I think we're all behind that. So excited for it. That's it. Really excited for it.
The other element Ayersman has to work with is hiring some coaches. What does a year one Division I coaching staff look like at a place that's never had wrestling?
Yeah, year one, we're going to have one full-time assistant with trying to work some things out with some GAs.
And GAs means graduate assistants, wrestlers who are looking to get into coaching. Usually their first stop is a graduate spot at a school. Then they get their master's degree and move on. Sometimes these are athletes still training or competing to try to make world or Olympic teams. It's actually one of the more transient positions in all of sports.
So that's definitely going to be, a possibility, and then probably a volunteer coach. So yeah, year one, we're full-time assistant, and where we're at with our full-time assistant is we've done the interviews and I've made the offer, and now we're just waiting for confirmation for all the, HR paperwork to go through to make sure everything, all the boxes are checked before we can announce. But I would say that the conference will probably be announced, and then shortly after, our first assistant coach of Little Rock will be announced. And I think that people are going to be excited about it.
Ayersman's in a unique situation in the world of college wrestling. There have not been that many Division I programs added in recent years. One that was brought back 2 years ago was Fresno State in California. In just the program's second year back, they had an All-American in Josh Hokett at 197 pounds. He's also been tearing it up on the gridiron for the Bulldogs football team this fall. So did Ayersman make any calls to Troy Steiner, the head coach of Fresno State, on what it was like to build a Division I team from scratch? You bet he did.
Yeah, I grabbed Coach Steiner I think it was at World Team Trials in Rochester. I grabbed him and sat down with him for a while, and I've called him a couple times. And, I've actually been in I'm just so grateful to all the other college coaches around the country that have consistently reached out just to give me advice, just to give me, insight, just to say, hey, listen, keep your head up. You're doing great things, and just the community of wrestling that understands what we're doing and how important it is. Whether they started a new program or not, they've been willing to help and give me advice, and I'm just unbelievably grateful for that.
And there are no ulterior motives from coaches when offering advice to Coach Erisman. On episode 10 of Rocked Up, we meet the new assistant coach, Javier Maldonado, and find out how he went from NAIA coach at Southeastern University in Florida to an assistant coach at the nation's newest Division I wrestling program. Rocked Up is a presentation of the Matt Talk Podcast Network and can be found on the web at getrockedup.com or on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, or wherever fine podcasts are found. For more wrestling-specific podcasts, check out matttalkonline.com. If you like the show and want to support it, leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/matttalkonline.